"Hello, we're putting the guns down." Police and medical personnel quickly arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, among the family of 4, only one person survived. Seeing him huddled in the corner of the house, the police couldn't help but feel heartbroken. But what happened next was beyond their expectations. The case had only been 3 days old when he anxiously inquired about the inheritance. At the funeral, he sang Sweet Day and used the government's compensation money to buy a luxury car. His behavior inevitably raised suspicion. Naturally, the police investigated him. It turned out to be a story full of lies and greed. He had lied to his parents, relatives, and friends. He had even lied to himself. Since being sentenced in 2004, he has always maintained his innocence. On April 3, 2023, his appeal was once again denied. As of now, he is still serving his prison sentence. So, what exactly happened that year? Let's go back to 2001 to find out the detailed events. The story takes place in Goddard. This is a suburb in New South Wales, near Marcote University, dubbed Silicon Valley of Australia. Not only does this place host many high-tech companies like Microsoft, HP, Oracle, Balmer, and others with headquarters in Australia, but it also has a convenient transportation system with both train stations and dense routes, just 15 km from the central business district. This makes it an ideal spot for the middle class with an atmosphere that is both bustling and tranquil. Located at 6 Collins Street, Goddard is a 2-story villa with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2 parking spaces, and a spacious lawn covering 531 square meters, making it extremely grand. In 1999, a man named Seth Goldzalet purchased this villa for $200,000 and renovated it. Subsequently, his family of 4 officially moved in to live there in December 2000. Teddy was a very determined man. Born into a poor family in Baguio City, Philippines, in 1954, the 4th child in the family. Teddy never blamed fate, but always strove hard in his studies, passed the exam, and graduated in law from Baguio University. Near graduation, Teddy met a girl named Mary Lova-Cladadeth. Mary was in the junior class, 3 years younger than him. They fell in love at first sight. Mary, the eldest in her family, was gentle and generous. Like Teddy, she was also very diligent. In 1977, shortly after Mary's graduation, they got married. Even though Teddy devoted all his efforts to his work, he was also a very romantic man in life. He often created small surprises for his wife, such as giving flowers, picnics, and unexpected gifts. On September 16, 1980, their son, Seth Goldzalet, was born. This name had a special meaning that Teddy intended to reveal on Seth's 21st birthday. Unexpectedly, on July 9, 1983, their daughter Cladid was born. As a lawyer, Teddy began to accumulate wealth from real estate. Then, he gradually ventured into other businesses such as audio stores, pharmacies, hotels, etc. Teddy himself was very capable, but his wife's family was even more so. Mary's brother-in-law was the mayor of Baguio City from 1986 to 1988. During that time, Teddy served as the mayor's secretary. It can be said that their family was prominent in both politics and business. In 1989, Teddy used all his savings to build a 4-story hotel with 40 rooms. Business flowed smoothly, but less than a year later, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck Baguio City, taking 142 lives. In an instant, Teddy's career and home went up in smoke. Worse still, at the time of the earthquake, his son Seth was trapped in a staircase. Teddy risked danger, crawled into a crack to rescue his son. That brave act caused him severe ligament injury. Luckily, the whole family was safe. Teddy and Mary believed it was a blessing from above. They rekindled their fighting spirit once again. However, this time they decided to migrate to Australia since Mary's sister, Emily, and her family were enjoying a good life there. In 1990, Teddy reviewed and retook the exam to obtain a lawyer's license in Australia. In 1993, he opened an immigration law office. Barry handled internal management and coordination, while Teddy was in charge of external relations and finding clients. Teddy was very competent. Orders kept coming in, helping them quickly join the middle class in the area. As devout Christians, Teddy and his wife not only set up an altar at home, but also attended Mass 3-4 times a week. They placed great importance on their children's education, hoping that they would be more successful than themselves. Therefore, they spared no expense in their children's education, with clear rewards and punishments to ensure their children focused on their studies. However, this inadvertently sowed the seeds for a tragedy many years later. On July 10, 2001, each member of the Teddy family drove separately to work. Their son Seth was particularly busy that day. In the morning, he had to attend school. In the afternoon, he went to his father's law office. And in the evening, he had a date with friends. Only their daughter Claudine, who was on summer break, stayed home to relax. She spent her time reading books and chatting with friends. Yesterday was Claudine's 18th birthday, and she still wanted to have fun texting friends to make plans. But before they could finalize their plans, Claudine became unreachable. At 11:45 p.m., Seth arrived home. 3 minutes later, the scene captured on video began. "We will call the police now," he said. After calling the police, Seth immediately sought help from the neighbors. When he mentioned seeing two figures, the neighbors, frightened, called the police again. Seeing Seth still intent on entering the house, one neighbor held him back. Suddenly, Seth shouted, "I know my mother's breath," and before he could finish, he darted into the house. The neighbor, risking danger, ran after him and pulled him back outside. Although the police and medical staff arrived at the scene within minutes, it was too late. Teddy, 46, Betty, 43, and their 18-year-old daughter Claudine were all dead. Medical staff discovered that all three had been killed with a sharp object, rather than being shot. Notably, Betty's large neck wound drew significant attention. Subsequently, a team of sniffer dogs was deployed to search for the two figures Seth had seen. However, possibly due to the rain that night, the dogs were unable to find any traces. Seeing Seth collapsed on the ground, Senior Police Officer Kamai comforted him first before asking about anything unusual at the scene. Seth recounted, "After my sister's birthday party the previous night, as the whole family was driving home, we were attacked on the road. A car drove by and shouted, 'ED, Asians.' This statement caught Kamei's attention. I've always wondered why such strange writing appeared on the wall at the scene. Now there's a direction for investigation, an attack aimed at Asians." At 3 a.m. on July 11, Seth gave his statement to the police regarding his day's schedule. the time of the crime, he was out with friends. Moreover, their meeting had been arranged the previous day, providing Seth with a clear alibi, and the police ruled out any suspicion of him. On July 13, Seth held a press conference and offered a reward of 100,000 Australian dollars for clues. I want to find out about the two sides of the world. In my world, we are two sides of the world. My friends and my people. I want to ask someone out there to help us, he said. However, as the investigation delved deeper, numerous doubts arose. It seemed apparent that this was not an attack against Asians. Nearly $1,000 in cash remained intact in Teddy and Betty's wallets. The crime did not appear financially motivated. The house was very clean and orderly. Although closets and drawers in each room were wide open, the clothes inside were neatly arranged as if on display. All three victims were brutally murdered. Besides the large neck wound on Betty, Claudine also had 7 stab wounds and several blunt force injuries. The dents on her room's wall provided evidence of the attack. 2 missing knives from the kitchen were later identified as consistent with the wounds on the victims. The 6 dogs in Teddy's house did not bark and were found locked in the laundry room. The only point of entry was the kitchen, but no fingerprints were found on the kitchen counter. The inspection revealed that the window frame had been forced out at the time of the crime. The time of death for the 3 victims varied, with the entire brutal act spanning 3 hours. After measuring the victims' body temperatures, it was found that Claudine and her mother's bodies were cooler compared to her father's, indicating that the mother and daughter died first. The blood stains on the briefcase and handbag at the scene suggested they weren't dropped during a struggle, but were deliberately placed later. Thus, the police gradually shifted the direction of their investigation. The first step was to accurately determine the time of death for each individual. By examining Claudine's diary, they eventually deduced that Claudine was murdered between 16:10 and 16:30. The last message she sent was at 16:10, and the open book on her desk indicated she was studying at that time. Mary's time of death was around 17:30. On that day, she finished work at 16:50, and it took her approximately 30-40 minutes to drive home. She was murdered immediately upon entering the house. This could be determined from the shoes she was wearing. Typically, after coming home, she would change her shoes and place her handbag in one of 2 specific spots. Teddy's time of death was around 19:300 because after finishing work at 18:23, he made 2 phone calls home. He too was murdered right upon entering the house, as inferred from his position, work attire, and the briefcase beside him. If this were an attack targeting Asians, the perpetrator could not have patiently waited for each person to return home while carrying a weapon, but rather used items at hand. After killing everyone, the perpetrator even leisurely took a shower, as deduced from the wet bathroom floor, indicating someone had used it. 6 days after the crime, the police asked Sepp to recount the events of that night. This time, they discovered discrepancies in his testimony. Sepp stated that he arrived at the house around 18:300. Before he could get out of the car, he received a message from friends notifying him that dinner was delayed by 2 hours. After getting the message, it started raining, so Sepp did not get out of the car. He called the home phone, but no one answered. He then drove elsewhere to meet another friend to kill time. This friend lived in Blacktown, 28 km away, and had recently moved. So Sepp searched for 2 hours, but could not find the place. At 2000, Sepp met his friend, and they had dinner and played games until 3:45, after which he drove home and called the police. Sepp emphasized that when he found his sister Claudine, she was bleeding, and he attempted to give first aid. However, the claim that he couldn't find his friend's new address for 2 hours seemed implausible. Moreover, the forensic report directly refuted Sepp's second claim. Claudine had been dead long before she was discovered and could not have been bleeding or had a beating heart at that time. Additionally, there were no signs of CPR on her body. Sepp had also said he saw 2 figures, but after multiple reconstructions, the police concluded that when Sepp drove into the garage and entered the house from there, the noise would have been significant. If anyone was there, they would have fled rather than letting Sepp see them. Thus, it seemed that Sepp, the sole survivor, had significant issues. The police focused on searching her room and found on one of her outfits traces of blue paint, matching the writing on the wall at the crime scene. They also seized her computer and an empty shoebox. The police used the shoebox to purchase identical shoes, and upon comparison, found that the blood-stained footprints at the crime scene matched these shoes. Furthermore, Sepp's internet search history from February to July 2001, nearly half a year, was filled with keywords related to poisons and toxic plants. Following this clue, the police discovered she had bought seeds of a highly toxic plant on June 24. The name of the plant was prohibited due to its danger. Coincidentally, a week before her murder, on July 3, her mother Mary was hospitalized for severe stomach pain and diarrhea, staying in the hospital for a day. At that time, the doctor diagnosed it as colitis because Mary's indicators did not match food poisoning. However, now the police had reasons to believe Mary was poisoned using those plant seeds. On August 3, the police interrogated Sepp for the 3rd time. Sepp claimed he bought the poisonous seeds because he was heartbroken and depressed. This, again, was a clumsy lie. Still, without direct evidence, the police could not take action against Sepp and decided to release her. They then tapped her phone and devised a parallel sting operation. Interestingly, not only the police, but also her friends and relatives found something unusual about Sepp. For instance, on the day of the press conference, Sepp deliberately asked the family accountant about inheritance. At the funeral, she sang "Descend Here," shocking over 300 guests. Later, she moved to a luxury apartment and used government compensation money to refurbish her mother's car. 2 months after the incident, Sepp lied that she had brain cancer and needed AU 190,000 for surgery. She even sent fake medical records to her relatives to swindle money. However, the fake documents ended up in the hands of the police. Not only did Sepp not receive the AU 190,000, but her future state compensation was also suspended. Without money to spend, Sepp began selling jewelry, watches, and her parents' 2 cars. As soon as she had some money in her hands, she immediately ordered a Lexus worth AU 173,000, around VND 2.9 billion at the current exchange rate. The salesperson expressed some concern, saying, "This car is very expensive." Sepp replied without hesitation, "Don't worry, I have inherited a fortune." Sepp's aunt is Emily. On the evening of the incident, at 6 p.m., on the way to pick up her son from school, she passed by her sister's house. At that time, she saw Sepp's car parked in the garage, but the house was eerily dark and quiet. Emily rang the doorbell 3 times without anyone answering. She was about to go around to the side door to look in when she saw a shadow moving inside the house. At first, she thought it was a clothes rack. Upon closer inspection, Emily remembered that her sister's house had 6 dogs, but she did not hear any barking, which made her increasingly scared. Emily took her son home first and clearly remembered that it was raining at the time. Besides Aunt Emily, a client of Teddy's also saw Sepp's car. This person came to deliver documents between 4:15 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. He saw Sepp's car parked in the garage, a blue Ford that was easily recognizable and unmistakable. 2 months after the incident, the police's trap took effect. An undercover cop befriended Sepp by complimenting her taste in fashion. After becoming close, he boastfully claimed he had an inside man at the police station. Sepp took the bait and asked him to snoop on her family's case. Following police instructions, the undercover cop intentionally let slip that someone had seen her car in the garage around 4 p.m. On the day of the incident, the police wanted to see how Sepp would react and whether she would change her testimony. Predictably, upon learning this, Sepp quietly prepared a second alibi. By January 2002, she confidently confronted the police, changing her testimony, stating, "I actually got home before 4:30 p.m., but didn't go inside. Instead, I took a taxi to a brothel to unwind. The reason I didn't mention this earlier was because it's embarrassing." However, Sepp wasn't aware that her phone had been tapped. She continuously called the brothel asking if they had cameras, how long they had been open, if there were copies of the guest book, etc. All these questions were recorded by the police. More importantly, the prostitute Sepp allegedly visited had taken a week off and wasn't present on the days before and after the incident. Her lie uncovered, Sepp then claimed she might have mistaken someone else. She even arranged for a taxi driver to testify for her. However, in reality, this driver had only received AU-50 from Sepp to write and sign a false statement. At this point, the police were convinced that Sepp was the killer, but still needed more concrete evidence. Interestingly, the evidence the police struggled to find was supplied by Sepp herself after hearing the secret information from the undercover cop about someone seeing her car at 4:30 p.m. Sepp fully believed he had an insider at the police station. She asked him to gather more information and sent a drawn scene of the crime with carefully noted times of death for each person. It should be noted that detailed information about the victims' times of death had not been made public. Only the police and the perpetrator knew this. Moreover, the handwriting on the sketch matched that found at the crime scene. Noteworthy is the incident that seemed pre-arranged before Sepp's formal arrest. On the evening of June 2, 2020, the police received a report about an assault. At around 8:30 p.m., the police arrived on the scene and found Sepp with minor facial injuries, lying in a ditch. She claimed someone had put a plastic bag over her head and assaulted her, but she couldn't see who it was. However, after examination, a doctor concluded that Seth hadn't suffered any head injuries. This clumsy act made the police suspicious, as Seth mentioned the executor of the will was her grandmother. It turned out that since February 23, 1998, Teddy and Betty had created a joint will. Regardless of who died first, all the deceased's assets would be inherited by the surviving spouse. If both died, Seth and Claudine would split the assets, with their grandmother acting as the will's beneficiary. The police are concerned that Seth will continue to pretend that his grandmother was also being hunted and accidentally died, preventing further investigation. At 8 a.m. on June 13, 2002, the police executed a warrant to arrest Seth on charges of aiding a person. After Seth was arrested, lesser-known stories about his family gradually came to light. The reason Seth acted so ruthlessly towards his loved ones could perhaps be partially understood from these stories. His father, Taddy, and mother, Mary, worked diligently and eventually achieved the life they wanted. After many years of effort, they accumulated a fortune of about 1.5 million Australian dollars, approximately 25 billion VND, and 1.3 million Filipino pesos, approximately 563 million VND. They were not only strict with themselves, but also with their children. Anyone who performed well would receive praise. This made Seth crave recognition from a young age. Seth's parents wanted him to become a cardiovascular surgeon and hoped his sister would become a teacher. However, in reality, Seth performed very poorly in his studies and only loved singing. After graduating high school, he could not get into any universities offering medicine or law courses. In 1999, Taddy did everything he could to get Seth into a medical program at the University of New South Wales. His parents demanded that Seth give up music, focus on his studies, and arranged for him to do odd jobs at the family law office, hoping that even if he couldn't become a doctor, he could inherit the family business. However, no one expected that just 2 years later, Seth dropped out. The reason he gave for dropping out was being too busy, so busy that he had no time to attend classes. Not only was he the lead singer of the band Definitive Vibes, but he also had a fan club and a personal website set up by fans. The website posted photos of Seth performing, showing off his body, and posing amidst long-legged women and tennis players. With his music career soaring, there was no time left for studying. Taddy was helpless, so in mid-2000, he had to intervene again and got Seth into a law program at Mercury University to encourage him. He even gifted Seth a car. Seth loved this car, particularly the license plate bearing his name. Strangely, after that, Seth's academic achievements suddenly improved dramatically, consistently maintaining high grades. Every time he received his report card, Seth was overjoyed because his parents would not stop praising him. Once, Seth benevolently showed his sister how to secretly change her grade from 75 to 99.9. As a result, he was immediately warned by his parents that if he didn't study well, his car would be confiscated. His sister not only reported Seth's grade, fixing to their parents, but also disclosed another secret of his. From childhood to adulthood, Seth often wet the bed. Each time, his mother had to wash his clothes and bed sheets. sometimes angrily insisting that he see a psychologist. This embarrassing episode naturally became a source of mockery and ridicule, possibly sowing seeds of cruelty in Sep's mind. Of course, Sep's parents were also strict with his sister. When they discovered she had a boyfriend, they immediately sent her to boarding school in Melbourne. It was said that Sep helped his parents break up the couple by sending threatening emails to his sister's boyfriend. Coincidentally, at the end of May 2001, Sep's girlfriend of 2 weeks also wanted to break up. To win her back, Sep showered her with gifts and promised to introduce her to his parents. Predictably, Sep was also dumped like his sister. Sep wanted to fight back, but his mother warned him that if he returned to that girl, he would no longer be welcomed in the family. Sep realized he was increasingly unable to control his life, always being threatened by his family with confiscation of his car, severing relations, disinheritance, etc. All these things to Sep were like a ticking time bomb. The fuse was lit when Sep received poor grades in 2 subjects. He tried to use a medical certificate for an upper respiratory tract infection to request a retake from the professor, but it was unsuccessful. He remembered his parents' harsh words. "If you don't study properly, go back to the Philippines. Everything in Australia will no longer be related to you." Sep was unwilling to accept this. Clearly, all these things would eventually belong to him. He thought, how wonderful it would be if everything was decided by me. On June 24, Sep began his cruel plan. That day, he ordered a batch of poisonous seeds. The next day, he checked the order and saw it hadn't been shipped. It turned out the supplier was on holiday, so Sep immediately emailed them, lying that his mother was about to turn 60. The seeds he ordered were meant as a birthday gift for his mother this weekend because she had seen them in Florida last year and liked them very much. He asked the supplier to expedite the delivery. In reality, Sep's mother is 40 years old this year. Last year, she didn't go to Florida at all. On June 29th, Sep received the seeds he wanted exactly on Friday. Upon receiving the seeds, he soaked them in hot water. Afterward, he mixed the soaked water into his mother's food. On July 1st, Sep's mother began showing unusual symptoms. On July 3rd, she had to be hospitalized in an emergency. By the afternoon of July 4th, she was discharged with stable health. To fabricate a scene suggesting his mother had food poisoning, on July 2nd, Sep wrote 3 letters, sending them to the food manufacturer his mother favored, the police station, and the quarantine agency. The content of the letter to the manufacturer read, "3 of your company's products have been poisoned. They are now being sold on the market. Ha ha! This is the result of you belittling your employees." The content of the other 2 letters accused the factory of loose management leading to food safety issues, delaying the recall of harmful products, failing to apologize to the public, etc. Sep's goal was to make people think that his mother died of food poisoning, thus diverting suspicion away from himself. In fact, when at the hospital, Sep even pretended to have a stomach-ache. However, Sep did not expect his mother to survive. Later, the police speculated that Sep might have extracted the toxin incorrectly. A few days later, on July 6, Sep had a fierce argument with his mother. about breaking up with his girlfriend. When she shouted, "If you keep seeing her, don't step foot into this house again," Seth was furious. Previously, his sister had been sent to study in Melbourne for a similar reason. Seth was distressed and terrified of having to return to the Philippines. He felt suffocated and pressured, especially recently, when his sister was home for summer vacation. The treatment by their parents towards the two siblings was entirely different. His sister was praised endlessly, while he was severely criticized. After his sister's birthday party on July 19th, Seth felt isolated by his family. His car was confiscated and his allowance was cut. He dreaded what would happen once his academic results were announced, knowing he would have no peace. The more Seth thought about it, the more anxious he became. By then, he wanted to target not only his mother, but also his father and sister, who were contestants for the inheritance. Thinking about his sister returning to Melbourne on July 12th, Seth decided to act the next day. He had previously arranged to have dinner with his friend Sam DeCiro at 8 p.m. the following day. The next morning, Seth went to school and worked at the family company as usual. At 4:15 p.m., he returned home, took a baseball bat he had prepared from his car's trunk. Feeling it wasn't enough, he went into the kitchen to fetch 2 of the sharpest knives. Seth quietly went upstairs to his sister's room. At that moment, all the grievances and humiliation he had endured over the years came flooding back her bed. Wedding, grade fixing, being threatened to be sent back to the Philippines, etc. Seth resented his sister for exposing all his lies. Without hesitation, he raised his weapons and acted. At 5:30 p.m., seeing his mother step into the house, Seth immediately attacked. By then, he had completely lost control. He patiently waited another hour until his father screamed as he entered the house. After finishing everything, Seth began ransacking briefcases, opening wardrobes, dismantling the kitchen window. Then, he changed his blood-stained clothes and took a shower. Finally, he staged the scene as an attack against Asians, painting racial slurs on the wall. However, even a cunning fox sometimes falls into a trap. Seth left traces of paint on his jacket. This was the only evidence proving he was at the scene. After 7 p.m., Seth disposed of the weapons, then punctually met his friend to have dinner at Planet Hollywood restaurant, followed by playing in the arcade until after 11 p.m. Seth was arrogant, thinking if someone found his family by then, he would have a perfect alibi. However, when Seth returned, the house was eerily silent. By 11:45 p.m., he realized he had to call the police himself because earlier, while at home, Seth saw someone arrive at 6 p.m. Thus, he initially fabricated a lie about arriving at the house at 6 p.m. Unbeknownst to Seth, a customer of his father's had also arrived and seen his car from afar at 4:30 p.m. In reality, from childhood to adulthood, lying had become second nature to Seth. Almost nothing he said was true. Especially in building his successful image, Seth had lied flagrantly. In the eyes of his friends, Seth was a world boxing champion and a future music star. The song Sweet Day that he performed at the funeral earned him a recording contract worth millions of Australian dollars. Seth still had a stable job at the family law office and owned a modeling agency. The models featured on the fan club website were just a small portion of them. Lies are like soap bubbles. Although they may conceal the truth momentarily, they will eventually be exposed. On May 20, 2000, Seth was sentenced to 3 life sentences and another sentence for threatening to contaminate food. Although Seth always claimed to be innocent, during the trial, the jury noticed a rare poisonous plant in Seth's garden. It was the seeds that Seth had carelessly discarded, which now became the most conclusive evidence. Seth may have been very skilled at deceit, but her ability to grasp details was extremely poor. Do you still remember the fan club website? You've probably guessed that Seth was the one who created herself. In 2000 and 2003, the house was put up for sale. The house known as Ann Fuck had now turned into the haunted house of Seth Lee. No one wanted to touch it. Until August 2004, a Buddhist couple from Taiwan liked the location and structure of the house, particularly because there was an altar on the 2nd floor. Therefore, they did not thoroughly investigate the house's history and placed a deposit of AUD 80,000. However, after reading the news and discovering what had happened in the house, they felt deceived and demanded the brokerage company refund their money. Initially, the company refused to refund, and the 2 brokers responsible insisted, "We didn't do anything wrong." If you didn't ask, why should we tell you? The situation escalated, and the local Office of Fair Trading intervened to investigate. Ultimately, the AUD 80,000 deposit was refunded, and the broker violating fair trading laws was fined AUD 21,000. Additionally, the local real estate association was required to amend regulations regarding advertising and selling properties, ensuring full disclosure of information to customers. Since then, a sign was erected in front of the house, noting that it was once home to the Goldzalet family. The house price continuously dropped. On October 7, 2005, a mysterious buyer acquired the house for AUD 720,000, around VND 12 billion at the current rate. This mysterious buyer told a magazine reporter that they wouldn't let the house's past ruin their dream home. On March 26, 2021, Seth failed in his 3rd appeal attempt. Currently, he is serving a life sentence as a particularly dangerous inmate at the Midjo Correctional Center in New South Wales. As for the meaning of the name Seth Goldzalet, the father had promised to reveal it to Seth on his 21st birthday. But Seth was destined never to know, and also no longer had the face to want to know. Today's video concludes here, and see you in the next videos.